Good afternoon. I call to order this special meeting of the Winston-Salem City Council here on March 25th. Pursuant to the policy and procedures adopted by the City Council relative to virtual meetings, I've determined that it's not feasible for the City Council and I to meet together physically today. And due to the Safer at Home order, all council members and I are participating virtually. Would the City Clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Larson.
Present.
Councilmember Clark. Councilmember Mundy.
Present.
Councilmember Scipio.
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Adams.
Here.
Councilmember Taylor.
Present.
Councilmember McIntosh.
Here.
Councilmember Burke.
Councilman Burke, we didn't hear your response. Like her video may be frozen. Folks, this meeting is being televised live on TV 13, and it will be replayed again on the city's website that you can log in and click on the watch meetings online option. Well, welcome back everyone to day 2 of our strategic planning initiative. Yesterday we talked about the schedule that as we develop our priorities, staff will take those and flesh them out, and the time frame would be for a May adoption of the strategic plan. However, the city manager told me this morning that it's staff's intention is because of the timeliness of the COVID-19 dollars that are coming into the city, that the staff is planning to come back to the council at the meeting in April, taking the work that we're working today and overlaying how the COVID dollars might apply to some of those initiatives in a quick kind of format. So we'll be looking at this again fairly quickly. Appreciate everybody's involvement yesterday. I felt good about it. And so I'm going to ask the city manager, do you want to say a word and kick us off?
Sure. Good afternoon, Mayor Pro Tem Adams, members of City Council. Thank you, Mayor, for teeing it off. And yes, we want to make sure that we can take your priorities that we hear today and tomorrow and overlay that with where the American Rescue Act permits. And that's a change. That's a moving target, but what we know so far on where it permits the use, so we can try to drive those dollars towards the highest priorities, and early on get your input as well as the public. So it's a lot to do and a lot of money, but we want to make sure we do it accurately and appropriately, but in short order. So with that, Mr. Tess.
Thanks, Lee. We're going to go ahead and kick it back to Michelle and her team and let them get started today with the agenda for the update and the prioritization.
Thank you. Well, it is a pleasure to be back with all of you again this afternoon. And I just have to say, you shaved a month off of staff's work already in overnight. That's pretty impressive. They went from May to April. So maybe this is a good thing. It's only a 2-day retreat, because if it were a 3-day, I don't know, staff would be working overnight, I'm sure. As we get started today, a couple of things that I just wanted to remind you all of in terms of our virtual environment. I think this worked well yesterday. I hope that you all had a good experience. I thought the conversation was very rich and flowed as well as can be expected in a virtual environment. So again, for the mayor and the council, I encourage you to keep your mute buttons off to the extent that you can. Keep your cameras on to the extent that you can, so we can maintain that conversational tone like you all did yesterday. Again, I ask your indulgence for a little bit of grace as we go through kind of the technology pieces of what we're going to do today. We will be taking a couple of breaks to allow for some of the technology to catch up with where we're at. But I know that's going to be a helpful way as you all begin the really important work of talking about your individual as well as your collective priorities. And that's really the focus of today's session. We're going to start by a little bit of a discussion discussion from staff about the existing strategic plan and the tremendous amount of work that has already been done and continues to be done on implementation of the existing elements of the strategic plan. We'll talk about some potential refinements to the existing initiatives within the plan. And then it will be your opportunity for each of you to share your top 3 initiatives that you are interested in this governing body discussing and potentially prioritizing. And then, most importantly, I think to staff's need to really identify where resource allocation is going to be best placed, we will do some prioritization later this afternoon as well. I just want to remind everybody, we're not taking a vote on what the most important thing is for this community, because as you all talked about yesterday, there are so many important elements that go into making Winston-Salem a great community. The purpose of the prioritization today is really to see where the energy is, where the collective energy is of this governing body, to help give staff some feedback so that there is some clear direction about that resource allocation, and also about where collectively this council is interested in moving the community. I hope that what you heard, certainly what I heard yesterday, was a tremendous amount of overlap in terms of your individual ideas and aspirations for the community, and needs, frankly, a lot of the needs that were shared. I asked Kelsey to share the graphic from the ending conversation yesterday, really as a reminder and hopefully a teeing off point, as maybe you reflected last night about those areas, what I would view as consensus areas that so many of you discussed about what you value today about Winston-Salem and what you hope will be true in 10 years. And so I wanted to share that again as a reminder of the important conversations that you all had yesterday. So with that, I am going to turn it back over to Scott Tesh, who is going to provide each of you with a summary of the existing strategic plan and the initiatives within it.
Thank you, Michelle, and good afternoon, Mayor Pro Tem, and members of the City Council. So before we get into talking about updating initiatives and new initiatives, it is appropriate to spend a few minutes here reflecting on what we've accomplished since 2017 and through the update in 2019. The slides that I'm going to show you today are going to stay at a very high level, but I am going to look at action items and specifically call out some of those that are still ongoing in each of the focus areas. So Kelsey, if you'll go to that next slide for me. Again, we're going to talk about which ones are completed and which ones are in progress. The next slide is a reminder of what the current plan looks like. So we have 6 strategic focus areas, as we discussed yesterday, and I want to draw your attention down there to the bottom line on the left side, which is there are 165 action items that were created between 2017 and the 2019 update. And so what we'll be talking about today are the status of those 165 items. Again, 122 of them were created as part of the original strategic planning effort in 2017, with an additional 43 added through the process that took place in 2019 with the adoption of the update in June of 2019. Kelsey, if you'll advance to the next slide for us. So overall, what we're looking at here is action item status. You'll see on the left side there, 126 of those 165 action items having been completed. So the largest slice of the pie is the completion. And I'll draw your attention to the right side to the bar chart, and you'll see those 2 smaller bars. That 22 of the remaining items are either ongoing or on schedule. And so on schedule would mean that they are key work items for the fiscal year 21 to be completed by the end of June. And ongoing are items that may take place, continue to take place past June 30th in the next fiscal year, and also include items where we may have created an action item in 2017 or 2019, and we've brought something to council, and the item may have changed in scope a little bit, and so we're continuing to work on it. You do see over there on the far right that there are a few that we have in the delayed, on hold, or canceled column, and I'm more than happy if you have specific questions to go into those. Staff will be providing a line-by-line report of every action item lined up to your what we called strategies in the prior plan that we're going to call initiatives going forward, and publish that in a document, submit it to you before the draft plan comes to committees, and that way you'll have a full accounting of all of the action items line by line that have been completed, and you'll see all of the new action items that you and staff have proposed, so that we can go piece by piece and make sure that there's nothing we're missing when we get down to that, much more granular level of the items that need to be completed. Kelsey, if you'll go to that next slide for me. So looking at it from a focus area perspective, you see that the highest completion rates are in healthy environment and safe and secure community. A little lower completion rate in livable neighborhoods. The table on the left shows you the number of items in the total column, and then the number that have been completed by each focus area. I will note in the livable neighborhoods area, two things that have most likely caused some of that in terms of the completion status. One would be COVID. I think there were a lot of the face-to-face things that were going to take place with respect to some of our housing initiatives that got bumped back. And so those fall still into that on schedule and ongoing category, either to be completed here by June or continuing with some of those groups that are meeting potentially into the next fiscal year. But what you see overall, as you saw on the prior page, is more than 3/4 of the items have been completed, and a good number of them on schedule to be completed here in the not too distant future. The next slides are going to go focus area by focus area, and you'll see again two series of bullet pointed lists. One on the left is going to be action items that have been completed. Some of these will have been completed recently. Some of them may be as much as 3 or 4 years old at this point. And then I'll take some time to focus on the bullet points on the right on each area, which are related to items that are still outstanding. I will note these are specifically items from the strategic plan. There have been a lot of key work items, and there have been other initiatives that have come along that were very high priorities for the city council that have been tackled. I would tell you there's a lot that's been done with our general obligation bonds as well as limited obligation bonds. And so you may not specifically see all of the projects and all of the programs that have been priorities and have been accomplished, because some of those happened outside of the strategic planning efforts, even though there's a strong nexus to objectives in the strategic plan. But just wanted to note that you'll see these are items and initiatives that were specifically called out in the strategic plan. There's obviously inherent flexibility in annual appropriations processes to meet current needs. So here in economic vitality and diversity, we see action items that have been completed related to downtown revitalization efforts, a lot related to economic development in several different areas, whether it be in the innovation quarter, prioritization given to Whitaker Park. We've done land purchases with the economic development sites and infrastructure bond money. Worked with Brookwood Business Park. We've seen an expansion of the SOAR program, had information items brought to City Council about our tourism and marketing efforts, what the local CDB is doing, and had some benchmarking information on the types of revenues that other jurisdictions had. And we've seen some updates to our minority and women business enterprise participation policies, trying to encourage that participation in our local economy. In terms of action items for future development, we still have the Greater Winston-Salem, Inc. Has done a study. We'll be sharing that with staff and with the mayor and city council. And so there are some policies related to economic development that you may be looking at as a result of the study that Greater Winston-Salem, Inc. has done. We have originally there was an action item to look at the city council, the county board, and the county school board all getting together. That has not taken place to this point. Had a couple of action items around land banking initiatives. There were at two different opportunities, parcels were brought to City Council to look at potential sites for land banking. There were other action items related to land banking in terms of creating a policy and actually identifying a specific funding source for economic development land banking. And those have been put on hold as there wasn't a general direction to do that. And then that project-based lending program would be looking at ways to provide capital for historically underutilized businesses that are willing to engage with general contractors and city programs, and that was also on hold. So we'll move on to the next slide.
Scott, before you move on, it's Alan.
Yes, sir.
Just a little bit of clarification. I realize that under the list that you showed us, actions completed, obviously there are many things on that list are continuing. We're going to have other projects in Whitaker Park, for instance, or the SOAR program is going to continue and grow, hopefully. So I assume what you're saying is based on the finite definition of what we're doing in the earlier plan, that those aspects were completed, but obviously we're still going to be doing downtown revitalization projects and so on. Am I correct in that supposition?
Absolutely, Mayor. So this is, as you said, a finite accounting of the specific action steps that were taken. Many of these become programs that are ongoing. Obviously, our economic development efforts are going to continue in all of those areas. SOAR is going to continue. We will continue to enhance those MWBE policies. So yes, this is just an accounting of the specific steps that we were taking for the initiatives that were in the 2017 strategic plan and 2019 update.
Thank you, Scott.
And that comment plays very well into the next agenda item that Michelle and her team are going to present, where she's going to talk about these current initiatives and any places where they may need to be looked at, may need to be updated as well. So that's a very good comment, Mayor. I appreciate that. And will be a good segue into the next part of the agenda.
I'll ask before you go to the next slide, are there other questions about the economic vitality and diversity initiatives that are up there now?
Well, can I ask a question?
Yes, sir.
I'm assuming at some point we're going to be asked for our input on what we would like on the new one, but not at this point.
That is correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm going to go through an accounting by focus area, and Michelle's going to come right behind Councilmember Clark and ask you for input on these.
Okay, thank you.
A quick walkthrough on these. So Kelsey, if you'll advance that next slide for us. So looking at the safe and secure community focus area, again, a lot of things that were accomplished actually in 2017 and 2018 related to community relations strategies. Still looking at diversion initiatives, but have the DRIVE program that has gotten up and going, and we're looking at those mental and behavioral health responses now. A lot of facility improvements that have been made in terms of district offices, new fire stations that are currently in design and have already been completed. And down there at the bottom, you'll see the city facility security improvements. So changes, we had the report that came forward, and so there were policy directives and changes that were made to increase the security in city facilities as well. Action steps that are still out there, one related to CEPTED, or crime prevention through environmental design, that looks at policing strategies as well as community development strategies and overlay to reduce crime in certain areas. The need for a comprehensive look at data analysis capabilities within our public safety departments, and then also trying to find an appropriate site for a driver training facility, which I believe there was a site located but may not have worked out. So that's still an ongoing item as we continue to look in that area. Are there specific questions here that we'd like to address?
Driver training, who are those drivers? All city employees, or help me with that?
So I would ask if Damon DeCane is out there and wants to speak directly to this. It focuses mainly on public safety driver training. So
Okay.
Mainly the police department, and I think an area for the fire department as well. But if Damon wants to comment on that, he can do so.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Scott. Good afternoon, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, members of the City Council. So the driver training facility's primary focus for this portion of it would be police driver training. The project is currently in the land acquisition phase. We've had several starts and stops with acquiring the property, but in essence, I think the vision is to have one large facility for all driver training, including the fire department as well as the police department. But as it is presented today, it's primarily focused on the Winston-Salem Police Department.
And was that initiative driven by the additional cost of a number of accidents, or just general best practices?
I believe the quick answer to that is best practices, because for our officers to to train appropriately, we basically need to send them to other places. We used to perform this training sort of at the fairgrounds and near the education building, and it just isn't effective. We really need a professional driver training facility in a location that can accept that type of activity.
Okay, thank you, Damon. I appreciate the extra information.
Yes, sir.
Unless there are any questions, we'll go to the next focus area. And we will look at, I believe, livable neighborhoods. Again, items that have been completed, looking at infill development. You'll also see on the other side mixed use development, something that's been looked at and actually was in committee this month. The housing study was completed and still looking at recommendations that came out of that substantial housing study. We have looked at, brought policies regarding public art to City Council twice now, again in committee this month, reviewed the historic landmark designation process. In terms of parks maintenance, again, there's a large deferred parks maintenance assessment that was completed, and we'll still be looking at additional maintenance and design standards that may have come from that, as well as talking with the city's engineering department. The BIC, or Building Integrated Communities Digital Resource Center, is available on the website. Have looked at many things related to healthy food options and the use of SNAP and EBT at different places, be it the fairgrounds or at the Liberty Street Vendors Market. And there were several housing initiative needs initiatives that were the action items were checked off as part of that process. So again, we still had, and I will call your attention to that, citywide affordable housing policies was something that was an action item, and I think something that we've marked it as ongoing. There are several initiatives going forward, but there hasn't been any specific citywide affordable housing policy per se that we put into place. Rather, there are many initiatives that are going on, and so that's one of those ongoing type action items. Mixed use and density development strategies, something in committees this month, but will continue to be looked at by Planning and Development Services and the Planning Board. And we spoke about the Recreation and Parks Maintenance and Design Standards. Any questions in the livable neighborhoods area specific to those future action items? And again, we can answer those and can talk about them in the next agenda item too, in terms of things that need to be updated with these initiatives. If not, we'll try and get through this to the next area. So in healthy environment, I have looked at sustainability ratings from what was originally the STAR program, but has now become LEED for cities. Looked at transit-oriented design and best practices in sustainability and green initiatives. Implemented a stormwater fee credit policy, and have looked at recycling ordinances related to mandating business recycling. Have significantly increased sustainability marketing and education, and have recently provided some information to the City Council on investment returns from energy projects, solar and otherwise. Actions for future development, mixed use density and UDO changes shows up in two areas because of the nexus between healthy environment and livable neighborhoods. And you see over there still looking at a residential recycling program and contract options. That is something that will be coming forward to City Council in the near future as well. So any questions here in the healthy environment area? If not, we'll move right along. Quality transportation, that first bullet point is meant to cover many things related to Business 40 closure, planning for, changes to downtown streets as well. We saw revisions to the transit system, the fixed route bus system, as well as changes in the handicap parking ordinance. We have done a significant amount of street resurfacing with the 2014, 2018 bonds, as well as, our annual bond cycles that we have. So a note there that we've done a significant amount of street resurfacing, although there is a little more to come as there's a little left in the pot. Have looked at bus shelter design and location and are getting those equipment and supplies and getting them in place. Have implemented transit quarterly ridership reporting to look at routes that may need to be modified, and have obviously made significant investments and with the opening of Union Station, and are still looking at what other staff may go into Union Station. So action items for future progress, still looking at greenway and pedestrian projects, Again, I mentioned the additional street resurfacing money that we have available from the 2018 bonds. And one note that in 2019, a WISTA, particularly fixed route transit utilization survey, was an action item, and that item had been placed on hold. And so staff would be looking for direction if you still wanted to do a transit utilization study. So that one was put on hold in Public Works Committee. Any questions there in quality transportation? If not, we will move right along into service excellence. And so we've obviously implemented our annual resident survey, looked at contact center best practices, and you'll see over there on the right side that we are going to be replacing, still in the process of, it should happen here before June, our customer relationship manager, or our CSR system that CityLink uses for all of the incoming service requests. We have looked at and are moving forward with pilots in the advanced meter infrastructure project related to water and sewer. Moved on several customer service initiative and development programs for staff. And obviously have replaced the city's website and down there have introduced a fiscal note policy, and have also done a significant amount with our key performance indicators and our performance measures that we have that city staff report monthly, quarterly, and annually. Actions for future progress, as we said, we're still in the implementation phase of the CSR system, and are still working on the creation of a new performance management meeting framework that would require all departments to review information and then provide that information to City Council, potentially on a quarterly basis as well. So any questions here in the service excellence area?
What's the CSR product, or are you building it proprietary, or is it a Salesforce-based platform, or what?
So it is specifically for service requests in CityLink, and it is a third party. It is the name of it is Rock Solid.
Okay.
It is not something that we built in-house, but we are working with that vendor to implement that product.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions here? If not, I know I've run through these pretty quickly, but we did want to reserve a significant amount of time today for you to spend talking about, the visioning process and the specific initiatives that you want to see going forward. So I can answer any questions that you have about current initiatives or action items if you have them, or if not, we're more than happy to move on to the next piece where input comes in.
Okay, so my first question in thinking about the existing initiatives that you just heard about, those that have not been completed. Obviously, thanks to the work that the organization has done, there are quite a few things from the original, what was that number, 172, Scott, that have already been accomplished, and there are still a number of existing initiatives that are being worked on or progress is being made on, some of which Scott mentioned were delayed. So I'd like to take this next conversation a little bit into two parts, knowing full well that it may get a little bit messy, and that's okay, as we talk about whether or not there are changes that you all envision to any of the existing initiatives. And then we'll talk about new initiatives, new things that you would like to see that aren't now covered anywhere within the strategic plan. So I'd like to start by talking about those existing initiatives, those things that you just heard about from staff. And I'll take this by focus area. And I fully appreciate there may be some new ideas out there too, and we will certainly capture those. But I want to start with existing. And in the background materials that you all received for this workshop, there was included a list of all of those initiatives. So in detail, all of the individual initiatives that are currently in the plan. Again, Scott provided an update on where those stand, many of which have already been completed. But as you did your homework and as you looked at the existing initiatives, were there specific changes that you wanted to see to any of the existing initiatives? And I'll start with economic vitality and diversity.
Are we talking about goals and visions, or are we talking about tactical changes?
Yeah.
Scott, you want to define that?
Sure. So when we use the term initiative, we're going to talk about that 10,000 foot level. What I reviewed with you were the action items that underlie some of those initiatives. And so in the pre-workshop materials that were passed out, what you would have seen, and those were called strategies in the presentation earlier, but those are those items that Michelle had asked you to reflect on. And so to answer your question, Councilmember McIntosh, at a higher level, we're talking about affordable housing, we're talking about green initiatives, we're talking about those higher level items. The more tactical things that we'll handle on a staff basis and in one-on-ones with council members, making sure that we have the correct action steps aligned to these initiatives, but we want to stay at that higher level right now.
And I would add to that, certainly if there are thoughts or comments that you have about the focus area in general, certainly now's an opportunity to talk through those. So I'm going to ask Kelsey to go ahead and share her screen, and taking the economic vitality and diversity focus area. Again, thoughts or comments about the existing initiatives within this focus area that anyone wanted to discuss?
Councilmember Adams here. I think it's great the work we've attempted to do since 2017 at the high level, but I do believe we've got to get more detailed and intentional in the work, particularly when it comes to housing, workforce training for me, and education. All three of those are connected. And I think it's important to, again, the sustainability and the thriving of our city, which puts us in a position to be able to provide results to our citizens when it comes to housing, workforce development training, working with that program, the technical schools and other cooperatives, the state and the feds, and education, partnering with our education systems, again, to help with pre-K. Yeah.
Michelle,
I just add to that, this is Alan. I mean, clearly to me, we have 6 areas of focus. The economic vitality and diversity one kind of drives so many of the others, because without economic vitality for our community, we simply don't have the resources to do the other programs that we want to have happen. We've worked hard as a council to have a very structured and I guess orderly way that we evaluate economic development projects and our investment, and it shows that we emphasize return on investment, but we've got to continue, I think, to push hard on this whole area.
But Mr. Mayor, just a comment again, and most of you have heard me say this, the economic vitality and diversity, again, if we can't prove and be transparent and show our citizens who feel like they're being left behind how we're helping them, then they really could care less about the big picture and the high level view. If we can't affect the quality of life in those areas that are most close and most important to them, and yes, the workforce development piece is connected to economic vitality, but more so to diversity of ensuring that Black people and poor people are able to benefit from our efforts.
John,
This is
John.
Go ahead, John.
Thank you. Economic vitality and diversity is a bedrock, certainly. And my perception is that we've got to support our business base that we currently have. Small businesses, which we know have suffered severely in the last 12 months, we have to bring them back. We have to figure out ways to allow them to grow. That's our employment base is based on the small businesses throughout the city. And we're going to have to give increased emphasis on facilitating their expansion, which includes matters dealing with inspection, loan programs, economic development opportunities for them. So I think I'd like to keep that in mind. The second thing that I think is important which oftentimes seems to get lost in our economic development, is the travel and tourism business, which is a core business in this city. Employees for restaurants and hotels and gas stations and a variety of things. We need to bring more people to this city. And we talked about it earlier. It's under the actions completed. Well, it's, of course, it's far from complete as we've agreed to earlier. But I would like to see us, particularly for our festivals, such as Black Theater, River Run, places like that, our attractions, Old Salem, Granola House, places like that. We need to support the things that people want to come see. These are new dollars for us. They bring money into the community, which we need, and they present the city in a way that allows people to see how good we are, and they want to bring their business or their processes to Winston-Salem. And so I think I'll talk a little bit more about presenting the city later, but those things are of interest. Thank you.
To ask Kelsey to share, we have a slide that shows all of the existing initiatives, the same ones that you saw in your agenda packet. So I'm going to ask her to, this is how I telepathically talk to her on a Zoom meeting. This is usually when I would slide across the room and make the change. But here you see on the screen, and there's a lot of them, so it gets a little small, but these are the existing initiatives that are within the strategic plan. Again, Scott shared a number of these have already been completed, or at least significant action has been taken on them. And so as you look at this list, as you ponder this list, are there changes that you would make to any of these existing initiatives today?
This is Annette. When I think of our economic vitality, I would like for us to make sure we have a policy that looks at jobs at every skill level when we're creating new businesses or inviting them in, that we must make sure there are jobs at every skill level, from the unskilled to the skilled to the professional. And we must identify those and let the community know exactly what's available and what's coming. If there's any training needs, we must do a better job of making sure we have that communicated through the community. One of the things that is critical is that we must recognize the role of nonprofits in economic development. Councilman Larson alluded to the Black Theater Festival. But nonprofits play a very real role in our economic vitality. And so as we look so broadly, we also have to be focused on things that don't always come to mind when we think of that economic vitality. So I know there's some, we don't want tactical, but those are just my thoughts about this whole thing about economic vitality and diversity. I don't see any really new things to add. I think it's fairly comprehensive. It's just that we need to massage them and make sure things are included very, very, very well in there.
And Michelle, this is Kevin. I'm still trying to wrap my head around process. Are you asking for new things yet? Are we still reviewing what's on the list from the last time this process was done and asking us to tweak this list?
The latter. So tweak this list.
Okay, because I agree with what John said and I agree with what Annette said, but I feel like that might be a little further into discussion. But one of the things that I see that I want to tweak is number 16, review workforce development training needs. Is let's think about it. That's a let's think about, that's not an action item. For all intents and purposes, we need to develop workforce development training needs. That's a very passive action item. I'd rather for it to be an active action item. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. This is Councilmember Burke. I agree with Councilmember Mundy. I was looking at number 16, a review. as it is not an action item. And I was thinking about, well, let me ask this question. Do we align job needs in our city with the workforce development training needs? Can anyone answer that?
I'll answer. No.
Okay, so
And I'll say we should.
I'll make that suggestion. I believe that we do need to do an assessment of the employment needs in our city. I think we need to really take a deep dive to see who our unemployed citizens are. And we need to take that data and we need to align it with workforce development training, which will promote skill and development training aligned specifically with those job needs with those individuals who are in need of jobs. And for any action item, we need to add to it some way to monitor it, a timeline for when we're going to be able to see results, a way to measure whether or not the action plan has actually yielded some success.
If I could offer a comment there, let me be sure I'm not on mute. No, I'm okay. I think it tends to go the opposite way. We tend to set the training programs up to match the companies that want to come. For example, if we found out we had 1,000 unskilled workers, I don't know if the job is for the chamber to go bring in some chicken processing plants that use unskilled labor. I think it's the other way around, and I think we've done a good job with Forsyth Tech. I know when Dell came to town and Caterpillar and some other folks, they said what their job training needs were, and then we try to work with, for example, with Forsyth Tech and other folks to say, okay, they need X types of folks. Let's go into community and train people in those areas. Because I think one of the challenges we have and every community has, and that is your current skill levels do not align well with future jobs, and therefore that requires retraining. Mm-hmm. And you kind of got to look at both at the same time, because folks that come in ask about unemployment levels and employment levels, et cetera, to know what's available. But at the same time, we got to be ready to work with them to train folks with whatever skill levels they need.
And I just want to add to Robert's comments there that all of us, I'm guilty of this myself. We're so much in the getting through this fiscal year, and you know, some businesses getting through this fiscal quarter. But today, we really need to be looking further down the road. And in that vein, we need to be working with Forsyth Tech to find out 5 years from now, what jobs are going to be in short demand. And if we can start training our people now for 5 years down the road, then that gives us a huge competitive advantage to municipalities that aren't doing that, so that we can go recruit somebody who, a company that needs aeronautics, and we're working on aeronautics. That's one example of where I think we're getting ahead of the curve. We need to do that more. And instead of responding for the need that's in our, you know, in the next month, let's look at the need in the next 5 to 10 years. And I think that's how we get head and shoulders above other cities of similar resource size.
Let me jump in here. I like the list. What I don't like is some of the sort of passive language on some of it that's been mentioned. So instead of number one, evaluate current economic development policies, you know, we need to do that, not just evaluate them. We've had how many years to evaluate them? We need to make that happen. Again, evaluate the use of land banking. I would change that to use land banking. Number 11, evaluate project-based lending programs. Let's initiate or institute those things. And number 16, you know, let's develop workforce development training. And some of the things that we're talking about here are areas like the tourism, bringing tourism in. We don't want to recreate the wheel. TDA does a really good job with that. We assist them. We provide technical marketing expertise where we can. But we don't need to compete with them. We need to work with them. And the same thing with, small business recruitment. Greater Winston-Salem is the group that we need to turn to say, go tell us what's happening in the marketplace. What do you see out there? Where do we need to focus our job training efforts? What's on the cutting edge? Who are you going after? Who's knocking on our door? Who has contacted us over the last year? And what kind of industries do they represent? Because trying to figure out, trying to pinpoint who's going to be the workforce needed in 5 years, it's like, we don't really have that crystal ball.
Let me jump in. I agree with Councilmember McIntosh. Made some great suggestions. Maybe as a general thinking, Scott should look at all of our lists and try to rephrase all of our items into action doable items. Jeff, number one there, they evaluate current economic development policies regarding non-capital investments. What we're saying is that our economic development structure is changing. The type of companies we're bringing here now are more job-oriented rather than building big factory kind of thing. So it's going to be more and more crucial that we have a policy that allows us to be competitive as we're trying to attract these new technology companies.
Mayor, I will say, as a best practice across strategic planning, I think you've hit the nail on the head, and Councilmember McIntosh and others who have said this, having an action verb there specifically related to an outcome is a best practice in strategic planning. I think what you'll see out of these lists with the more passive verbs is a reflection of that there were 76 of these, and that potentially there was not the appetite or the resources to be able to take action on 76 different areas. And so if we stay at the 10,000 foot level and we're a little more strategic in nature about how we craft these, I think using those action verbs is much more appropriate in this process for the upcoming 4-year strategic plan.
So I've heard a bit about the phrasing and the use of words and being more action oriented. There was a lot of conversation about number 16 as well too, that you're done with the reviewing, now it's time to do. In the same way that changing wording is important, but also making sure that the actions follow that change as well, and seeing coming back for council to have staff come back with some revisions and some updates to some of those existing initiatives that match some of the conversation that you all had about essentially the changing economy.
This is John Larson. We sort of have number 7 and number 16 have a linkage that we may want to clean up a little bit. And yesterday we spent a lot of time. We spent a lot of time talking about pre-K, and I'm not sure whether that's too deep in the weeds for this discussion. But somewhere in economic development and training, you want to start at the baseline. So if we're talking, what's this place going to look like 10 years out? We can't start pre-K early enough. So I don't know whether that's an omission that we need to add later, or whether or not I want to make sure we don't forget it somewhere in this discussion.
Yeah, if I could jump in real quick, this is Councilman Clark. I went to an event where they had some entrepreneurs. I'm going to number 10, and they asked them, what could we do to be more entrepreneurial friendly? And the second item on the list was childcare, which you would not normally associate there. But what they're saying is, if I'm an entrepreneur, I need childcare. And also the number 1 one was affordable office space. Now that may change a little bit with COVID, but I think when we get back to Jeff's comment of action steps, that's where you get in there and you go ask the small businesses, what do they need? And come up with some action steps from that.
Can I ask for clarification on 10? Because I just heard someone else say, and I can't remember who it was, that we really don't need to be recruiting business. That's what Greater Winston-Salem Inc. is for. So is that, how do we reconcile that? I'm not challenging it. I'm just looking to understand it. Are we in the business of recruiting businesses, or are we in the business of supporting the organizations that are charged with that initiative? And I don't know who to ask that question to.
I think that's a good point, Councilmember. In many of these areas, the city plays a support role of putting dollars into it. For instance, that whole area of recruiting small businesses, we just approved $650,000, I think it was, that was going to be NMARS incentive payments that's actually going to the Agile Cities program that will be recruiting technology companies. So I think that's a good point that you made. Maybe, again, the language should be, we support the recruitment of small businesses or support Greater Winston-Salem and their efforts, or whatever it might be.
Okay, thank you.
That makes sense to you?
Yeah, I was just trying to reconcile that in my head. Thank you.
Yes.
Councilmember Mundy, I will add the action items that come underneath these. Many of those are action statements related to supporting those entities and making sure that they're reporting back to council on their initiatives, and that anything that the council needs to support them is in front of the council for action. So you would see the action items underneath some of these include those specific steps about working with partnerships and or making resources available where necessary.
Okay.
So I'm going to move us on to the next focus area, and I'll ask Kelsey to share the list of the existing initiatives for safe and secure community. You'll see the dates. A number of these are from the original plan. So some of these are older, and Scott did share which ones have already been addressed, or at least begun to be addressed. And so I'll ask the same question with this list. Are there tweaks that you want to make, or questions perhaps that you have on this list of existing initiatives in the strategic plan?
I do. This is Annette. I have a real concern that we need to do more crime prevention so that we don't have to do so much after they've served time. So I would think that has to be promoting more intervention programs and prevention programs so that we don't have to deal so much with the back end when it comes to safe and secure community. I also think we need to have something that we must work with agencies to create a real safety net for homeless, abused youth and teens. Teens. There is a real problem for homeless teenagers and nowhere to go for them. They're in that gap. They're too young for some and not old enough for other support, but it's a real issue in our community. So I could see that as being another action step.
Questions or tweaks to these initiatives?
Can someone tell me about number 4? Is that the district realignment that we've already done into 3 districts? Or is that an ongoing plan that hasn't finished up yet?
Councilmember Mundy, that's twofold. One, yes, it includes the realignment that has already taken place with the district police offices. It also included action items to look at the creation of another downtown district, which has not happened to date, obviously.
Okay. Number 5, I would say you can't. Anytime you say retain qualified personnel, unless it's in there somewhere else, you also have to recruit. You have to recruit them before you can retain them. And they, in my head, they just go hand in hand.
Councilmember Larson, I think you had a comment.
Yeah, I was curious about emergency disaster preparedness reinforce. We built a new emergency control center. I'm not sure, do we have specific items yet? All of these just sort of wide open, continuing sort of, I'd say evaluate infrastructure needs related to public safety. We're doing a lot of renovation right now in public safety facilities. I'm just curious as to when these bookend, or are they just going to be open all the time now?
Councilmember Larson, I think to address those specifically, the reinforcing emergency disaster preparedness, as you noted, there's a new EOC, and the city county emergency management operates out of what was the old Phillips building now. Also, there were specific action items related to the coordinated terrorist attack grant that is still ongoing and has been for quite some time in terms of looking at multi-agency disaster simulations, both tabletop and in person, related to a multitude of different potential attack types. So we saw several action items related to that as well. In terms of the facility, I believe you asked about public infrastructure for public safety facilities. That would have included things where we had the discussion about the driver training needs, as well as a potential fire training needs facility, several of the district offices, as well as new fire stations that were constructed and or approved and are currently in design phase as well. So in terms of the question regarding bookends, there are many of these projects. The individual project to complete a fire station was not a strategic plan action item. At the phase, we were looking at which ones do we need to replace and where do they need to be. So the location of new, like Station 13, would have been one of the action items to look at related to that initiative. But also, yes, public safety personnel are going to constantly evaluate their needs. There were just specific needs that were called out as part of the strategic planning process in 2017 and 19.
So number 8 and number 10 are really part of number 7?
I was speaking to kind of all of them at once. Obviously, the driver training needs was called out separately from district realignment, separately from the police and fire district facilities and new stations. And so, again, there were 76 of these initiatives that were created over the 2 years under which this was done. And so there were many of these that probably could have been consolidated together and had specific action items underneath them. But I was speaking more generally to several of those infrastructure and equipment needs related to public safety. I can pull the individual items for each one if needed, and we will be reporting that again before you get the draft of the strategic plan. City Council will get a full accounting of each one of the items by initiative.
I would appreciate that, because obviously these are open items with something still to be done on them, but I'm not sure what that something is. And if I could have a little more clarity, obviously driver training is pretty clear, and fire operation facility is pretty clear, but some of these others that seem to be a little more open-ended as to what the actual work plan includes on those. Emergency preparedness, disaster emergency preparedness, for example. What else do we need to be done to sort of complete our initial program of work for that one? So understand what I'm asking for? Is that?
Yes, sir. And I will, like I said, there are 2 things I will note there. We can give you the specific action items in the strategic plan that underlie these, but there are other things that make it into annual business plans and work items. We're always going to be constantly looking at disaster preparedness because we have a department whose job it is to solely do that. When these initiatives were created, there were specific items tied to them, and we will give you an accounting of those specific items and whether they've been completed or not, and what their projected completion date is if they have not been.
And what we're trying to figure out, or what I'm trying to figure out, are the special needs. I'm not aware of special needs within for example, that category that we should be discussing in our long-range plan. And I'm assuming that's coming from staff, but I don't have access to understand what the requirements are for that activity of the city that we should maybe be addressing. If there's a list already of things that staff has prepared or that we have not completed yet from the previous list, I think it'd be nice to know that.
We will get that to you. Absolutely.
So Scott, I have a question. This list looks more like what the police department and the fire department would be doing, and we're putting all of the safe and secure community efforts within those 2 departments. But outside of that, there are things that residents can do to ensure that their neighborhoods can be safe and secure. And one of the things that I'm constantly now being requested is the extensive speeding that's around town. And so, yeah, we do have a traffic calming process of putting in the speed bumpers, but we don't have any kinds of marketing or efforts to reinforce to residents their responsibility of helping to keep the city safe and secure. And I'm not so certain where that comes. It's not so much under livable neighborhoods, because it's really about, you know, being residents being tactical about what they do, and marketing that. I'm not certain if I'm getting that idea out, but that's what I'm trying to figure out, their responsibility, and we need to put some more on them. And maybe we aren't talking to them enough, or, you know, encouraging more speed bumps or something like that. You know, in order to get a speed bump, they have to ask us for it, as opposed to us just saying we're going to do it all over the city.
I think if I understand you correctly, Councilmember Scipio, the idea there is related more towards civic engagement, more generally, and it may not be you're using the speed bump example, but there may be several opportunities that you're talking about. And this may be something when we get to service excellence, where we're talking about our overall communication strategies and civic engagement. There may be something appropriate to note there. I'll make a note of that and make sure that we bring that up.
Okay.
Scott, is graffiti under gang intervention? Where's graffiti in this world that we live in, other than on the walls?
I would have to go back. I don't know that we had a specific action item in our strategic planning efforts over the last 4 years related to graffiti removal or prevention. If that's, again, at the 10,000 foot level that we need to address, we can talk about that. Otherwise, we can make sure those specific interventions or items are definitely accounted for at the action item level.
Okay.
So if we prevent gangs, we'll prevent gang graffiti. So they kind of go hand in hand too with number 2.
The other thing is that some of the prevention is not just around gangs. We just need to prevent all young people from getting into criminal activity. It's easy to focus on gangs, but we have a lot of youth that are not in gangs, and they're in situations that might encourage some negative behavior. And I think that we aren't really focusing on that unless that's in another category also.
Well, let's move on to livable neighborhoods, and we'll see if it's there or one of the other categories. The next one, here's the list. There's 16 here of existing initiatives. Questions or tweaks to any of these?
I would like to comment on the first one. Concentrate efforts in reducing blight in targeted areas. I would more like to encourage and promote subsidizing and rehabbing areas, not just our typical tactic is if it's blighted to demolish it, as opposed to trying to retain and rehab and create stability. And I would hope that we would increase that or change that wording.
Councilmember Scipio, would you? I looked at that one as well, and rather than making it a negative of reducing blight, something about spurring investment in targeted areas.
Thank you. That's a good word.
Because that's not so tactical. It's more kind of overarching.
When I look at number, I'm sorry, Jim, were you finished with your comment? Okay. Number 4, evaluate the implementation of recommendations. That is enforcing our bias to non-action. That to me means nothing. I mean, I'm being a little critical here, but let's make affordable housing available. Can we change that to make affordable housing available? I mean, because evaluate recommendations,
Kevin,
what does that gain us?
I get a little problem with that. making affordable housing available is something we can't say we're going to do because that's, I mean.
Help me out with a way to word that, because the way it's worded, honestly, it doesn't provide anything for our citizens.
How about encourage?
How about implement?
Look at number 13 is kind of redundant, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well,
Yeah.
at least number 13 is an action item, address affordable housing needs. We have the need for affordable housing. Let's address it. I would say it's redundant to number 4, but it's definitely superior as far as giving us an action item.
How about just implement the recommendations for number 4?
As context for that specific initiative related to the housing study, there, to the best of my knowledge, having reviewed that, more than 100 recommendations, many of which we did not control or caused or will be in need of significant millions and millions and millions of dollars of resources. And so saying implement all of those recommendations would not be feasible. That's why it was evaluate implementation of that. That housing study was coming right during the strategic planning process. And so I think that's why that got carved out as its own initiative at that level, was that we had this very large report and we wanted to look at all of those recommendations and determine which ones were feasible and to which ones we could allocate resources at that time.
And may I say, Scott and council and the mayor and staff, community development and housing general government, the staff have been working to get all of this. Right now, as you know, across the country, all of the cities are looking and benchmarking each other and looking for funds, hopefully with the present administration. But as they said, that study took years to get. It's a very viable document. We are working with other institutions and organizations, other local nonprofits, housing justice. Trust me, you will be getting the steps as to what we are now winding up, even with everyone's home and those types of organizations. I think one of the things that I foresee is what's Scott is in all of these recommendations that we have, is that the staff just go back and clean it up and make it more concise to, after listening to the comments of the council, and make it more concise, more action oriented, but also knowing that these items have been worked on, as you can see the dates even before that, and they will continue, as he said before, as we go forward.
To that point, it seems as if number 4 really becomes a subset of number 13.
Correct.
But that's a tool. Number 4 is a tool that you use to do number 13.
That makes sense.
Correct.
And Scott and Mayor Pro Tem Adams, that context helps me understand why it was worded that way, and it does make sense. Thank you.
Yeah, and it's a lot, just like a lot of these things that you all are seeing that maybe haven't seen them before, that again, as we said, this is not the first strategic meeting, so we're building on a decade of strategic meetings with the council and staff. Some of them are always going to be in progress. Some of them we will tweak and retool. But there are certain documents and processes and policies, instructions that will work in tandem with some of these areas that are listed throughout these action items and suggestive subdivisions.
And I think just to add maybe a little more clarity, I think part of the value of this conversation, I think for staff, is for staff to hear that you as the governing body are giving them permission to make some changes to this strategic plan. Because as was talked about yesterday, this is your plan. This is not staff's plan. This is your plan. And so they can't make those changes without your approval. And so hearing your conversation about these initiatives is really critical to give them that direction that they need to come back to you with something that is perhaps more precise, cleaned up, more action oriented. But again, I'll just speak for staff. They don't want to change your words without your permission to do so.
I do have a question about, should we just send to Scott some of our action items that we think should go under some of these strategies so that they're into the plan. For instance, there's a lot of houses that may be boarded or abandoned because they are air property. And we need a way, a policy on how do we deal with air properties, and as well as properties that may have a lot of sanitation liens on it and they're now vacant and you can't do anything. People aren't willing to invest in properties that have a lot of sanitation liens, and it could be vacant land or it could be a house. And I mean, do we send those things to Scott because we know those are issues that people are talking about that have that may be impacting some of these strategies?
I would think that as part of when staff comes back to the council with that updated strategic plan with a level of detail that Councilmember Larson asked for, I think that's an opportunity for you all to have some conversation about other elements that others of you may see. I think, again, the value is in having the conversation about what some of the critical issues are so that staff has that direction. So I would say hold that point, and I think there'll be an opportunity for you to do that and for the council to do that when staff comes back with the updated plan.
I don't want to wait a month or two so it's lost. That's what I'm trying to figure out. Is it more efficient for us to just send them ideas?
Councilmember Scipio, I will tell you, at the end of the day today, there will be a list of these initiatives and they'll have a priority or at least a tiered structure to them. And anything that you have that is related to the strategic plan that is at that lower than 10,000 foot level, absolutely email it to me and we will find the correct alignment for it at that point.
Okay, thank you.
Let me add one thing too, Michelle. This is Lee Garrity, Councilmember Scipio and Mayor and everybody. I'm hearing you want to make sure that these initiatives are very action oriented. Yeah. And actually, in some cases, things that we'll put as action items under the initiatives will be actually the other way around. It'll be a little more passive. So we'll be, we may be implementing pieces of a study or reviewing something new, benchmarking, but that's for the action purposes of implementing more or creating more affordable housing. The other thing Scott said is, and I remind you all, is we will also, after we get the initial alignment here, we will also be doing one-on-one meetings with all of you to try to coordinate your specific action plans. But again, it has to come back and make sure that the majority council wants to go that way. Thank you.
Okay. If I could offer a few comments, this is Councilman Clark. I had 6 areas written down of strategic importance to me. One was housing, and a lot of it's covered here. But I'd also say as a preface that it was probably the hardest area I had when I was thinking about it of what we can and cannot do. We have about $15 billion of our $21 billion tax base is housing, those apartments and single family, et cetera. So from a dollar impact, we can't impact it much. We don't even have enough money to do 1% of what's out there now. But what we can impact, and this is, I think, what Ms. Scipio was mentioning and some other folks, what are the policies that the city has that may be impeding the building of affordable housing, whatever. And I think here we need to meet with the folks that build houses and ask them, what can we do? I will say in my 21 years on the council, we have passed dozens of ordinances related to housing. And I would say, and I can't think of an exception of one that didn't raise the cost of a house. But they enhance the quality of it. And that's a trade-off there. If you want more or cheaper houses, you can put them on smaller lots, for example, but we don't particularly want postage-sized lots out there. So there's a lot of balance here, but I do think one area we need to put under that, Lee, is, and I know we've been working on this, is a pretty comprehensive look at our housing ordinances and what they cost to have them.
Councilmember Larson, I think you had a comment.
Yeah, I have two comments. Let me see if am I on? Yeah, 2 comments. One, it looks to me like maybe 9 and 14 are sort of redundant. You may want to see if those could be consolidated. And also I guess the last one, number 16, Explore African American Heritage Initiative. I mean, we've sort of launched that. If we want to, I would suggest, I mean, I think it's very important, and I compliment Councilmember CPO for putting that together. But I do think, from discussions we've had about the impact of highways and stuff on the African American communities that we've discussed recently, I do think they may need some funding. And so I don't know whether the words there would be support or fund the African American Heritage Initiative. I want to keep it on our radar, but I think explore is probably not the word anymore to be using there.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe Annette would like to comment on that, since that's her wheelhouse.
Oh, I agree. Explore is not the word, since we actually implemented it. And I guess the word that I would probably think of is one of the missions is to identify how African American history can be melded into everything in the city, our whole history. So I like the thought of support of Mr. Larson, because there is no funding set aside for that, particularly commission. But I would like to see us engage the African American Heritage Initiative and other operations of the city and the community.
If I can say something, this is not a budget meeting, so I don't think we need to put in here whether we're funding anything or not. I agree that explore is a little passive. So
engage.
Let's put a more active thing in there, and let's kind of get back up to the 10,000 foot level.
Support.
The next area is healthy environment. 9 initiatives here. Are there questions or comments or tweaks to any of these?
Make bulky item. I was thinking that one of the things that we don't do very well is we really don't engage our neighborhoods to become volunteers to maintain a healthy environment. And I wish there was what we could do to connect our neighborhood or our residents to help in maintaining a healthy environment, i.e. our greenways, creeks, storm drains, and excessive dumping, that kind of thing. And that might come in, I guess you'd think if it's marketing, it's service excellence, but I'm not certain where we do that.
Any other comments on healthy environment?
The reinvigorate sustainability programs, does that include things like solar, looking for opportunities to implement solar power? Does that include looking for areas to encourage the use of hybrid and electric automobiles and vehicles?
Councilmember Money, it had several action items related to it. Two that you mentioned were things that council had looked at. I've looked at opportunities or provided a report, on the payback of particular types of not just solar, but different types of green initiatives in terms of capital projects. I've looked at and made some changes to part of our fleet with respect to alternative fuels. And then when you saw earlier things specifically related to community engagement, marketing, and public education as well. And also reconvening the sustainability, and I'm going to forget the official name of it, and I'm sorry if Director of Operations Johnny Taylor is out there, but the Sustainability Committee had stopped meeting for quite some time and has started meeting again to provide direction or at least provide advice to City Council on items related to sustainability.
Would that include things like our tree canopies? And because I'm not seeing a lot of issues that are specifically environmental. And I think John mentioned at yesterday's meeting, where would that fit in? And this is the obvious place for it. And they may all be covered just under a broader topic.
I think, again, under a broader topic of sustainability initiatives, many of these could be consolidated together into something related to action in green and sustainable initiatives. And then again, below that 10,000 foot level, if we wanted to discuss bringing specific items back to council, we could do that.
Okay.
Scott, John Larson, number 3, of course, STAR is no longer a program. So what we do have is this council and the mayor have endorsed, I believe, the Paris Agreement as a rating and guiding system. We might look at how we want to replace that number 3 to evaluate our program of sustainability as quantifiable goals and objectives that we can meet. I think one of the biggest problems we have is identifying some specific targets to achieve the bigger goal of carbon reduction. And it includes everything from trees to fuel consumption to power and power source generation and what have you. So I don't know how we begin to get our arms around that, but I think it's a number 3 somewhere. And it's more than evaluate, it's actually implement. Is a word I'd rather see us use maybe in conjunction with that.
Absolutely. As you noted, STAR is not around anymore, and it changed into LEAD for cities, and there are other initiatives to gauge and rate sustainability across multiple initiatives. That program, STAR specifically, looked even outside of what we would call the healthy environment focus area for us, and included things that the county reported as well. So there was cooperation in producing that. But I think both what you said, Councilmember Larson and Councilmember Mundy, there's an opportunity here to look at if that becomes one of the highest priorities, obviously in healthy environment and for the council to work several items underneath a more consolidated approach to sustainability efforts.
We did pass a resolution about 3 months ago from that committee regarding our goals, I think for 2035. And that probably ought to be somewhere in our plan, at least acknowledge that we've done that.
Okay, the next area is quality transportation. Questions or tweaks to these 10?
Obviously, number 1 is a mood issue now.
Yes, right.
Thank God.
Thank God, right.
Except for that multi-use path.
That's true.
Yeah.
Number 3, we developed a policy for that.
Right.
I would say number 8 was on my list of things to talk about, street maintenance and repairs. I think we need to be more quantifiable in that area. We used to have a goal of 85% of the roads with an 85% rating. I think we need to go back to some measurable goal that we can steward against each year.
Mm-hmm.
I think we still need to pursue conversations with DOT and the federal DOT about rail, light rail, or train mobility in Winston-Salem.
Yeah, agreed.
If the infrastructure packages are going to build gets passed, we need to already be like shovel ready with an idea.
I agree with that. If we're ever going to get it, now's the time to try to jump in.
Is that part of number 6 or is that different?
It needs to, it's part of number 6. It's probably more of a, again, we need the action item piece of it. That means actual conversations with our representatives, the Department of Transportation, and that can be done. But they need to constantly hear us talking about our Forsyth County, particularly Winston-Salem. We are the hub of economic development for the western side, northwest of North Carolina. And we are the only major city that has no rail transportation connectivity to anywhere.
So 6 is the goal, enhancing multimodal transportation. But what I hear you saying, Mayor Pro Tem, is that it's time to take action on that now to make sure.
Absolutely. And it should specifically say train or rail, something like that.
Yeah, I think it needs to be pulled out. If we're talking about, multimodal transportation can be just about anything, but I think this is important enough that it needs to be accentuated.
You're right. Just like we had to fight for get the Beltway back on track here in Forsyth County and around Winston, we had to gather, and the mayor knows, a concerted effort to get us back in front of DOT and change the scoring average, and Councilmember Clark knows. We need to do the same thing with our efforts for rail transportation through Winston-Salem.
Got a train station.
No, that's right.
Ready to roll.
All right, the final area is service excellence. 9 items here that magically got bigger. That was my reaction too. Small font, hard to read on screens.
I think we need to always continue to enhance our website, social media, and resident communication strategies. Again, COVID has taught us a lot of how we are able to interact with our constituents. I think that's very important. It goes back to what some of the other council members said about the ability of people to be able to use technology and broadband not being accessible. But I think going forward, just because we update a website now doesn't mean the website is obsolete next year, and what needs to happen in being able to communicate with our citizens. I do believe that we also need to constantly figure out a schedule of when we do the surveys of our customer service from our citizens. I think that we need to have more like the census or business organizations, that we just don't do it once a year, twice a year. It needs to be just like we do budget updates and things like that. People need to be communicated with, and we need to be able to hear from them what they think of us, even if we have to scale it back like the census does, to get a general idea of whether we're leading and in the right direction with them.
Is number 5 still relevant? Somebody in finance?
No, it's done. Well, the bonds are approved, we got to spend it.
Yeah.
We probably need another bond issue in the next 4 years, though, don't you think, folks?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I think that's true.
Yep.
Change the dates on it.
There you go.
I think going forward, like we found out, because we was Winston-Salem and waited so long to have a bond, and we had it in 18, but again, it was a concerted effort. We put some time and thought as to how we could convince the citizens that we needed it. And we did the same thing in 14 and 18. And I think like other cities our size, we need to always be looking at, again, how do we get citizens to understand that a bond passing is not just for a one-time deal or two-time deal, because capital projects and other areas are needed for improvement on an ongoing basis, and we just can't do it with tax revenue.
Mm-hmm. And number 3, is that not Utilities Commission? Do we have any skin in that game?
Councilmember Larson, that is related to the Utilities Commission. It came out in, I believe, the 2017. I can't remember. I have to look back if it was 2017 or 2019. But the City Council did have updates from utility staff on how that would take place, what it may do to the rate structure, and several other things. So I think a lot of that was bringing information to the City Council to see if there was anything that needed to be discussed outside of Utilities Commission related to that. And I would let Assistant City Manager Damon DeCane comment on that one too, if I have misrepresented that or if anything else substantially needs to be added.
Thank you, Scott. Good afternoon again, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, members of the City Council. So the automated meter reading, that is definitely, obviously, a Utilities Commission concern. However, on the service excellence side, there are some collateral benefits citywide to the data acquisition and the ability to communicate with the customers through several portals. And so the city as a whole and the county as a whole can both benefit by some of the upgrades that will be included as part of that project.
So other than billing, Damon, I don't quite understand what the benefits are.
So some benefits, Councilmember Larson, would include a portal where you'll be able to access your account, which would show your stormwater fees and all those other sorts of things. And there are ways that on the information system side of things that you can benefit the city and county just through simple access by those avenues. That's one example.
Great, thank you. That's transparency. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
My last.
Okay.
On the subject of meters, I don't know if this goes under, supporting downtown as economic development, but updating our parking meters has got to be on this list somewhere.
They're vintage.
We're going to sell them.
There you go.
That's what Aiken, South Carolina did when they took those out in the 70s.
Councilmember Larson, did you have another comment?
Yeah, number 1, we've been talking about closing the loop on 311 calls ever since I've been on council. Are we making any progress on that, of letting people know that how their requests are being processed and completed or not? I still get comments about the black hole of 311.
I do too, John.
I do too.
Councilmember Larson, I will let another member of the management team pop in after my comments if they'd like to. As we discussed earlier, that new system is still in an implementation phase, and I believe it's scheduled to be fully implemented here in late spring before the end of the fiscal year. And so there are other action items in the service excellence area related to that implementation that will take place afterwards. And they do include marketing communications strategies to residents about new online portal, as well as potentially looking at dashboards so that the mayor and city council could look at the different types of requests that would maybe coming by service type or by ward as well.
That would be great if we had a dashboard that would give us by ward at least the actions, because sometimes things get called into 311 and then they'll sit there for a while and then we get called with requests that replicate maybe what's sitting on the 311 work program somewhere, and it would be just a lot easier if we could keep a track of it that way.
Yes, sir. Those are to be coming once the implementation of the solution takes place.
Terrific.
And what's that timing, Scott? Did you say?
I would defer to others in management. I believe that we were looking for a May implementation of that system.
That's correct.
Great.
Late spring.
Any other comments on service excellence?
I have a question. Is number 4, can someone explain what that is for me? Is that just for city staff or what is that?
Yes, ma'am, Councilman Recipio, that was specifically for staff. Council at the time with that initiative wanted human resources and city management to spend time thinking more organizationally about development and promoting the mission, vision, and values of the organization. That included rehauling our customer service excellence initiative as well. So it was very much an internal professional development related specifically to how we provide customer service and how we view our mission and our vision.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, we have now walked through all of the existing initiatives. We are going to take a quick 10-minute break. It is 2:35 by my computer screen, so we will come back at 2:45. When we come back, this will be your individual opportunity to share, this is the hard part, your top 3 new initiatives. So you know now what's in the plan, what the existing initiatives are, what is being worked on. All of this will come back to you. But the question is, given everything that you've heard over these last several hours, yesterday as well as today, what's missing? What's not in there that you believe is critical? So each of you will have up to 3 to share. So while you're adjusting your fluid levels, please think about that. And when we come back, each of you, if you choose, will have the opportunity to share your top 3 new initiatives. Again, things that are not currently covered within the existing strategic plan. All right, so we will see you back at 2:45. All right, well, welcome back. I hope everybody enjoyed their quick break. So again, now that you've had the opportunity to walk through the plan, and I think staff has some good direction about tweaks that you all want to see in some of the existing initiatives, I think there's opportunity for some cleanup, as some of you mentioned, some things that perhaps aren't relevant anymore or that have been completed. Now's the opportunity to hear from each of you and hear what your individual priorities are. And so given everything that you've heard from the community as well as from your own perspective, I'll invite you to share your top three. I will also request that just in the interest of allowing all of your colleagues the opportunity to share, that we keep comments to no more than 5 minutes. I don't have a button or a buzzer. I do have a mute button, but I would never do that to any of you. But I will be keeping track of time and ask that you do that as well too. So, I mean, there may be some repetitive ideas here, and that's okay too. That's great. That shows where the energy is. So I always will invite the mayor to go first or choose a different point in the process to go. But Mayor, would you like to share, or would you like to pass to one of your colleagues?
I'll play. Thank you. Well, I think my top priorities, of course, is to get us post-pandemic back to a job growth level of about at least 3.5% per year, new job growth. Also, in terms of a goal of reducing the poverty level here in Winston-Salem over the next 4 years by 8 percentage points. Obviously, I was going to hit affordable housing, but I think that's well represented on the list, so I won't say that as a new one. But I think I might just throw in that I'd like to see us look at certain key community fundraising efforts, such as the food bank, senior services, trellis support, and others that are underway right now, to see if we might have any overlay with any of the pandemic rescue dollars that are coming into the city.
So I heard job growth, reduced poverty level, and community fundraising.
Yep.
Got it. Thank you. Anyone like to go next, or I'm happy to go through the roll?
Do the roll.
All right, so then that is, I think you just volunteered, Councilmember Larson.
Oh, great. Okay. Well, I have broken into 3 categories: the environmental category, and I'm very much a place person, and I'm going to let other people worry about the people part of Winston-Salem. I'm going to worry a little bit about the place itself. And so under the environmental, I put three actions: one dealing with litter, kudzu, and graffiti. And we don't seem to have consolidated programs on addressing any of those, but they all affect the presentation of what people see when they come to Winston-Salem. And I'd like us to spend a little more effort in trying to consolidate and focus in a concentrated way on those 3. On economic development, like the mayor, I want to see us get through the pandemic, but I want to see us reopen the town. And I think that's a marketing effort with travel and tourism. And we need to partner with the travel and tourism industry and make sure everybody knows that we're open for business. Our convention center is busy and humming, and the tourist sites are open, and we need to concentrate on getting them back online and financially stable. And that's something new, and that's sort of a short-term 2-year project probably. And lastly, with the neighborhoods, this is not a new issue, but we've got to do better maintenance. This is whether it be roads and sidewalks or whether it be the buildings and facilities. We've done these studies. We don't need to do more. We need to start implementing our maintenance programs to improve the appearance. And all 3 of these, I think, impact on how the city is viewed by outsiders coming into our town, whether it be strawways or whether it be parks, whether it be graffiti on the walls or what have you. We just need to clean up our town and dress her up a little bit. And that's what those 3 are about. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Clark.
Yes, thank you. I'll stay within my 5 minutes. First off, as a preface, one of the driving philosophies I have is that a good job solves a lot of problems. That doesn't say any job solves all your problems, but a good job solves a lot of problems. And I think when you really peel the onion back on so many issues we have, a good job is the only way you're going to solve these problems. How do you afford housing? You get a good job. How do you work the wealth gap? You get a good job, on and on. So I have for 20 years and will continue to put generating good jobs is my top priority. And I think to do that, we have to me, it's a combination of education, interfacing with opportunities. We don't do that much in the education field, but we can impact opportunities. Having said that, I had originally picked 6 areas. I will not touch on parks and roads that have been touched on and on housing, but I will touch on 3 specific areas. First off, I think, and I'm calling it the COVID reopening plan, I think it's a big enough item. It needs to be a standalone strategic plan. It is all encompassing and it touches every facet. And we've already mentioned a lot of those, everything from helping the restaurants reopen to the bars, to nonprofits, to venues such as River Run and National Black Theater Festival, et cetera, et cetera. But I think it is so important and so encompassing that it needs to be right in front of us. And again, as John just said, it's probably a 2-year plan, but it's a $55 million budget. The next area, the last 2 areas I have, next one is digital divide. I think this is something that impacts so many of the other items in there, and I think we need to address it. We are part of a consortium in town that's looking at it. It is a large project. It's a little bit more than just running wires. But I will tell you, for an example, we have with great reluctance, only because we were forced to, approve cell towers. But we have because we kind of had to. But I mention that as an example because we're going to have to put all sorts of new 5G cell towers up. Mm-hmm. And we got to have the political backbone to say, if we're going to go to 5G, they got to go around town. So digital divide's the first one, or the second one. COVID was the first, digital divide is the second one. The third one is childcare. I truly believe the importance of childcare has been shown to all of us in COVID. A lot of folks have had to give up their jobs because they did not have childcare for the last year. We are part of, again, a study in that. I'm not sure what we can do there. I will tell you again, as an example, I've been on this council 20 years, and I can remember at least 2 or 3 childcare rezonings that were turned down because of NIMBY. Nobody wants a childcare facility in their neighborhood, put it in somebody else's. But it gets back to what can the city do to help childcare? And it may not be running the childcare. It may be what are the zoning restrictions we put on it, things of that sort. And I feel sure I think it's called Forest More, or whatever it is, campaign that we're a part of will come back with a number of recommendations. So my 3, COVID plan reopening, digital divide, and childcare.
Thank you. Let's see. Next is Councilmember Mundy.
I would like to point out very lightheartedly that Councilmember Clark gave us 4 and counted as 3, and that really worries me because he's in charge of finance. You forgot generating.
I gave you 6, but didn't count 3 of them.
You gave us generating good jobs. Which I put some different ones because I know you would catch that one, and I agree 100%. Generating good jobs would address affordable housing, would address poverty and so forth. But I pulled kind of 3 variations on maybe some of the ones that have been mentioned before. I have poverty cessation. Somebody that I was speaking to recently said, so many of the programs that we have help people live more comfortably in poverty. And my goal is to take people out of poverty. That's a initiative that will never end, but it has to be ongoing. Also, like we've said, we're not in the job of building houses, but we can fund those who do. There are poverty cessation plans abound in Winston-Salem, and nonprofits that have really got a handle on this. One that I'll specifically name is The Shalom Project has a program called Flourish. Part of they are training single mothers, and they provide childcare while they do that, and their success rate in plucking people out of poverty is substantial. So we need to fund those organizations that can help stop poverty. We need to fund the arts robustly. We don't, if you look at other cities, if you've been involved in the arts in other cities, we're probably the middle of the pack, but as the City of Arts and Innovation, if we're going to claim it, we need to support it. And we also know that the historical funding revenue sources for the Arts Council and all of the funded members has gone to the wayside. And the arts are money generators if you do it the right way, and we need to do it the right way. The other thing we need to, I would pull out as a separate initiative is the green economy. There are all sorts of initiatives that we have to take to save our planet. Those can turn into jobs. I believe, I can't swear to it, but I believe Forsyth Tech actually has some green economy jobs that are looking in the future what jobs are going to be needed as we really, as a world, try to tackle this problem. We can harness that. We can make that a good job opportunity for a number of people and help protect the environment.
Can I ask a question, Councilwoman? On green economy, is that you talked about jobs? So is it about promoting jobs in support of the green economy? I want to make sure that I understand what you see as the role there.
I think it's twofold. We as a city need to take initiatives that will save our environment, and those initiatives that we will take will create jobs, because you have to have people skilled in doing new jobs and new production facilities. And when you look at the different types of jobs that that caring for your environment will produce, there are jobs out there to be had, and we can take the lead in that.
Thank you. Okay, Council Member Scipio.
Okay, my three areas of concern and initiatives are, the first one is improving the physical landscape in my neighborhoods, because where you live and play will impact your attitude and your aptitude. To that extent, I have over 300 properties that are over 100 years old in the parts of my ward. And I'm really concerned about retaining those properties, rehabbing them, as simple as some curb appeal projects, so that where people live is just a wonderful place for them. So that's the first thing, is improving the physical landscape in the neighborhoods. My second concern is improving the people landscape in the neighborhood. And that means that I have a lot of underserved and populations, poverty, in our communities. And I want those people, we need to lift them up, and they need to be included in many aspects of the community. They need to have economic mobility, and their culture should be appreciated. So initiatives that would actually enhance them, build them up, and make them a real part of our city. The third initiative for me is the power of community connections. Winston-Salem has a lot of outstanding resources, but we don't talk to each other. We don't get together. People work in silos. They live in silos. Their social life is in silos. So I'm very concerned about connecting residents to each other, to the community, to the resources that are here. Because what you know will oftentimes determine how far you go. And I have in the East Ward, I have 2 different distinct wards. Is divided by Salem Lake. So half of my ward is a very old African-American neighborhoods that have not had much of attention in over 70, 80 years. And then the other half are areas that have been annexed into the city that were quite rural initially, but there's a lot of development going on out there. So to connect and engage all of my residents is really a goal of mine.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem.
Yes, I would like to see funding sources for affordable housing. How do we make it happen? Is it through a creation of a foundation? Is it through, as always, public-private partnerships? But how do we get off the block and help to jumpstart funding sources for affordable housing? I'd like to see collaboration and funding for pre-K. It is known now that cities can no longer sit on the sideline and constantly say that that's a state and county job. It is all of our jobs if we're going to improve the quality of life of our citizens and generations to come. I'd also like to see an organizational process plan of those public-private partnerships that allows us to connect and eliminate redundancy of programs and services. And how we connect.
Thank you. That was a lot of P's to write. Public-private partnership plan. So took me a minute to get my fingers around that one.
You just could have put PPP.
I should have. That would have. Well, now PPP has a totally different connotation.
I know. They stole it.
P3.
Councilmember Taylor.
Good afternoon. As I mentioned to you on yesterday, we've had a number of town halls and community meetings in many of the neighborhoods I represent. I've been around for about 12 years, so I've got a good understanding of what the people in my community who I represent want. Number one, I like to see us create more jobs for small businesses. Typically, when we do incentives, we do them for large corporations who want to come into the city of Winston-Salem. I like to see us focus a little bit more on providing opportunities and incentives for small businesses. Secondly, community and economic development. I'd like to see us have a little bit more resources for building rehabilitations for community businesses. And also, I'd like to see us be able to expand the NRSA areas, the neighborhood revitalization strategy areas. I'd like to see us expand those into more urban communities. And lastly, I'd like to see us continue to focus on workforce development in the city. Not only preparing folks for the jobs that are going to be coming, but working to expand existing initiatives, which was, SOAR was once a new initiative, but I'd like to see us, as I said yesterday, expand SOAR and also focus on youth development initiatives such as new internship or apprenticeship programs for young people who live in the city of Winston-Salem.
Do you put, Councilmember Taylor, just so I am clear, workforce development, that is separate from youth development? Or do you put those together?
I mean, we can consolidate them. Okay. But the way I have it listed as 3 separate items.
Thank you. Councilmember McIntosh.
I guess the first thing I want to say is looking at the list of initiatives that we came up with over the last 2 sessions, I'm kind of proud of what we've developed. It's a good list. It's pretty comprehensive. And I'm not sure I want to add any new initiatives. I mean, there's been some suggested here that I'm good with, but I don't know if these are more tactics or initiatives. So I'm just going to run with it. I agree with Councilmember Adams. We need to cement in a recurring funding source for housing, as well as economic development. We need law enforcement reform / enhancement. We need to look at 21st century law enforcement and how we can be the best in that. The field is changing. We need to be at the very front of it. And then the last thing is we need to be a 21st century digital economy and that's across socioeconomic spectrum. There needs to be digital equity in our community.
Thank you. Councilmember Burke.
Yes, I would like to say that everything that I would have suggested has already been stated. Thank you.
So this is quite a comprehensive list. There's a lot here. There's certainly some areas that are very much in alignment with each other, some that I would categorize. I often say that there are two types of people in this world. There are lumpers and splitters. Those who take everything separate and apart, and those who lump some things together. I tend to put myself in the lumper category when it comes to looking at some of these initiatives. I see a lot of similarities in the things that each of you have mentioned. Reactions to this list?
It's great.
Yeah, good list.
Combined with the other list, I think, we've got a heck of a work plan ahead of us for the next 5 years.
Other comments?
This is Councilman Clark. I'll just remind everybody that the debits have to equal the credits. I got to put on my finance chairman hat. And at the end of the day, we only got so much money. And while we think 55 million is a lot of money, it's roughly 10% of our total budget for 1 year. So it's nice, but will not cover everything. And therefore, I will continue my emphasis on bang for the buck. Are we getting bang for our buck? Are we getting our money's worth, so to speak, when we spend our money? Thank you.
Other comments or reactions to this list? So I'm going to ask your indulgence again, and we are going to take another break. This is usually where, when we're in person, we have sticky notes and we move some things around, but it's a little more complicated to do that in a virtual environment. And so we are going to take a few minutes for us in the background to take this list and do a little cleanup and create some precision around the language and some consistency around the language, and put some like ideas together, and bring that right back to you just after the break for you to take a look at and to have some additional conversation about. So it is 3:10 by my clock, and we will take 15 minutes and be back at 3:25. Welcome back. So while you were on break, we took a quick look at all of the initiatives that you all shared. And as I said, we were lumpers and we put some of the like initiatives together to again, ensuring that we are staying up at that 10,000 foot level to identify where there was some commonality and where there was some energy. And I'm gonna actually, if I can do this, I'm gonna spotlight for just a moment our graphic facilitator, Julie Giesecke, who captured all of the initiatives that you all said as you went around. So we have that full list of the comments that you all made, and we took this list, and with that kind of created a smaller list, if you will, of some of the ideas that were combined. And I'll invite Kelsey to share that now. And I'll give you a moment to review that list. We'll talk through it. So when we reviewed that list, there were a number of comments made related to job creation and workforce development that we combined, promoting new job growth, jobs for small businesses, community and economic development resources. We put those under the category of focus on job creation and workforce development. The next, there were at least 2 comments made related to reducing the poverty level and poverty cessation. That was the next bullet. There were a number of specific items that several of you mentioned to address the more immediate COVID reopening, including working with small businesses, partnering with travel and tourism to reopen Winston-Salem, marketing to get people back to work as well as back into the community. So developing a COVID reopening plan. Community fundraising was another initiative that was raised. Environmental initiatives and the green economy were 2 comments that were received that were combined into 1. Addressing the digital divide and 21st century digital economy was the next bullet. Addressing childcare needs. There were at least 2 comments related to infrastructure, particularly neighborhood infrastructure, so neighborhood maintenance related issues. Collaboration and funding for pre-K. Developing an organizational plan for public-private partnerships. Law enforcement reform, 21st century law enforcement. And community engagement, the power of connections, we saw as a community engagement element. And then there were several specific funding related items that people had mentioned, specifically funding for arts, funding for affordable housing, and funding for economic development. And so that's how we lumped some of these together, but this is your plan, and we want to make sure that you see things that were important to you listed here or captured here in a broader category. So I'll ask if there's anything that we missed or anything that you would categorize differently.
Michelle?
Yes.
I have a question, and you probably said it, I was reading instead of listening. Community fundraising, give me just a little more context for that one.
I would invite the mayor to share. That was one I believe that he mentioned specifically to pursue community fundraising.
Councilmember, the city has been approached by at least 3 major fundraising groups, Senior Services, Trellis Support, and Second Harvest, for fairly significant help with some major fundraisers they've got. So my thought was, let's take a look at those in light of the COVID relief funds that are coming to the city, whether or not we might be able to help out some of these groups using those funds, perhaps.
Okay. Thank you.
Michelle, John Larson, where did you end up putting travel and tourism?
That was part of the developing the COVID reopening plan to partner with travel and tourism to reopen Winston-Salem.
Yeah, well, it's more than just reopening Winston-Salem. It really sort of falls under long-term economic development as well. But as long as we have it somewhere that we can develop that theme.
So add a bullet for specifically as it relates to travel and tourism.
I'd like to see it either under job creation or under funding for economic development.
Okay. All right. So we'll make sure that that's captured under the focus on job creation, including that would include small businesses as well as in the travel and tourism industry.
Exactly.
Other questions or comments about this? Reactions to the list?
Ms. Allen, I certainly agree with Councilmember Mundy about using poverty cessation as our ultimate goal. I don't think we're going to be able to do that in the next 4 years. So that's the reason I was suggesting a more intermediate goal in our next 4 years of being able to measure how we're doing on that. And maybe staff, when you're developing the work program from this, will maybe break that down a little bit to have some intermediate goals. Perhaps that might be the way to address it.
Mayor Joines, I would say that needs to be the case for every single one of these bullet points, and that's just my corporate background. If we don't have, if we decide to pursue it, and I know we cannot pursue every single thing, but if we decide to pursue it, we need to have a timeline and we need to have a way to measure our success.
I agree.
So every single one of these has to have a quantitative goal established.
All right.
Any other questions or comments? So Councilmember Mundy set up this next thing very nicely, and he didn't even know it. As he said, the city is not necessarily in the position to pursue everything that was discussed. Not that all of this isn't important, but we want to get a sense from you about where your individual, we talked about your individual priorities, but now that you see this in a collective list, where is some of the energy? And so I'm going to ask you all to share in the chat your top 2 items of this list. If we were only to pursue 2, which 2 would you envision to be the most critical at this juncture? Yeah, Kelsey did put the numbers down just to help a little bit. But I invite you to share in the chat which 2 items here you would.
Michelle, I think we're only able to chat with Meredith, Kelsey, and you. So which one of those should we choose to share? Unless that's a change that Meredith can make, unless I'm overlooking something. I don't see the option to chat with everyone.
Oh, I don't know. I would have to defer to Meredith. If that doesn't work, then I would invite you to share it out loud if you're willing to do so.
Meredith is here, so she can comment.
Michelle?
Yes, ma'am.
So part of these already fall in our initiatives that are already in the strategic plan. Like number 1 and let's see. And number 11. So I don't know if they're uniquely different than something we're already doing. So I'm trying to figure out how to vote for that.
Well, and I don't want you all to feel constrained by voting. This is really more just to give staff some general direction of where the energy of the group is collectively. If there is some clear energy in one particular area, then they know that that is a real high priority for this group. And there may not be. It's really more of a temperature check, if you will. And there are certainly things in here that are elements of the plan right now, but I think has been discussed in the conversation today and yesterday that because of, let's take number one, for example, given where the economy is today, it may look different than the strategies that are in the existing strategic plan. And therefore, it may require a different approach.
city manager wants to comment.
Yeah. Thank you, Scott. Yeah, I think we've got some clear direction here. There are some of these things that overlap with the existing plan. There's some other things that I know that aren't spelled out here in as much detail. I know it's under neighborhood maintenance, but I still understand council's desire on pavement condition, things like that. So we will make sure that we tool this so that it fits together, dovetails, but certainly the priority for new money, for stimulus money, should fall within these top bolded things first.
Another 2 to the bunker. We go 15.
Any other questions for staff?
I have a suggestion that I'd like for city manager, possibly staff and the mayor to think about. Instead of meeting one-on-one with council members, I wonder if you have ever in the past done, or if you would consider meeting in small groups of 2 or 3 council members at a time, so that we can share ideas and get ideas from each other, and it would actually be a little easier on the staff if they could have 3 to 4 meetings rather than 8. And you don't have to answer that. Just think about it for those of us who probably almost all of us will have had our vaccines by then, and for those who are comfortable from a health standpoint meeting in small groups, it might benefit the whole process. That's just my opinion.
13 now, Abraham. So, Abraham answer from Mexico. Have a good day.
Anything else? Any other questions? Any other process questions or clarifications? Okay. Well, as we close out today, we are right at the end of our time together. And I would just comment that you all have done a tremendous amount of work in a really short period of time. And I hope that you all take the collective good of these conversations with you, hopefully to an in-person environment in the not too distant future when it's safe to do so. Oh, and thank you, Councilmember Mundy, for remembering the rule from yesterday.
You had one rule, and this is my boy Chase. He's had a sore arm for the last 2 days, and I've been worried about him, but he's been right beside me.
Did he get a vaccine?
Has he gotten a vaccine? That might have been it.
So as we close out our time together, I will ask each of you to just share your parting thoughts about your time together and what your key takeaway may have been from today and yesterday. And as always, Mayor, I invite you to go first or last.
No, I just would say that I'm always so pleased and not surprised at how well this group works together. There's so many good ideas that come from it, and we take these ideas in a positive way and support each other's ideas. So I think that's the reason City of Winston-Salem is able to move forward the way we do, is because of the cohesiveness of our elected body.
I would like to say that we got a lot of work to do. We always have work to do, but this is a different time that we're living in. And I just ask everyone again, be patient. It's not Burger King. You not get everything that you want. Our citizens not going to get everything that they want. But it's our responsibility to look at the big picture. And as was stated earlier, providing the best bang for the buck, but mostly the best services for the bucks.
Michelle, I just want to say thank you. I think this was really well run. I think it was it was as easy as it could be. I do have a question for you. What's your background? What's your personal background?
Oh, my actual virtual background or my own personal background?
Virtual background.
It is a canned office.
Oh.
This is my office in Durham.
Okay.
It looks like
I
the
want to say
welcome
that one
center.
of the thing that I wanted to do coming into this was learn what was on the minds of my fellow council members. And I think that was done. Mission accomplished there. I'm happy to see that we still support things we supported 2 years ago and 4 years ago. Certainly current conditions have thrown us a curveball, and I think some of our items have addressed those. I think it's important for us to recognize, even though it was kind of a popularity contest there at the end, but not everything is going to get equal weight and equal support. And so the things that was more unanimity around are the things that council and staff need to focus on the most. So even though it was on the list, doesn't mean it's going to get the greatest amount of attention from us.
Any other volunteers?
I'll say, as the new person, along with Councilmember Burke, this is the first time I've felt kind of back and forth and some good conversation. And you moderated that very well and encouraged it, Michelle. But our meetings are so short, and we have a specific agenda that we have to cover, and there's not a lot of opportunity for exchange of ideas. So this was very helpful for me.
I would simply add that I'm incredibly proud of this city and where we've been and what we've accomplished in the last 10 years or more, even before I came on council, obviously. And what I find exciting is the opportunities that have been outlined today and yesterday about where we can go in the future and trying to get a clearer vision on that. And they're possible to achieve. I don't think there's much on here that we can't achieve over a period of time. And as Councilmember Dee Adams says, we may not get it all at once, we may not get it all, but we can get a lot of it done. And so I want to thank my colleagues for working through this. I enjoyed working with you in the last couple of days, getting a better vision of what we're doing. And I think we're all proud of the city and what the mayor's done since his tenure. We see the city has transformed itself, which I find amazing. My history at Old Salem is, we were a craft town and we had to go to the industrial base, and we've now come out of that industrial base into technologies. And I'm really optimistic about the future of Winston-Salem. So thank you for 2 days worth of energizing here.
Thank you. I'd like to give my comments. I really have enjoyed the process. When I came on the board, on the council, I was very impressed that the city had a strategic plan. It wasn't something that most residents would even think about trying to find, but it's a guide for us in our decision-making and in our services. And the thing that I always remember is that this city is not just roads and parks and bridges. This city is really the people. And no matter what we do, we must constantly have them top of mind, because when we serve the people well, our city will be phenomenal because they will talk about it. So I'm very pleased with the process that we've had in this strategic plan. And I thank you, Michelle, and your team for doing a great job of tolerating all of our good behavior. We were on good behavior, and I thank you for that. Thank you, everybody. I enjoy being with all of our council members, and I just wish we could do more, just getting around and chatting over issues more often.
Councilmember Clark?
Well, I've already given my 2 cents about getting our money's worth because there's dollar signs everywhere on these things. So we got to figure out what can do the most with the funds we have. The other thing, which has absolutely nothing with meeting today, but I do want to put 2 cents in for getting back in person. And I think it might be helpful if the city manager could poll the 8 or 9 elected officials and the staff members that are typically at the meetings, just to kind of see where everybody is on this. And I personally think we're not going to meet in July, so maybe August 1st should be our goal, or sometime in June. Anyway.
Councilmember Taylor?
I just want to thank you for moderating the process. I learned today, or it was rather reinforced, that we all want similar things for our communities. Just sometimes we have different ideas on how to get there. Today we were able to prioritize those ideas, and it was important for me not to come in here today and say what I think should be done, but to speak, reverently regarding those things that the community sent me down here to do. So I think we were able to accomplish that today, and I'm happy that we were able to set this strategic priority for the future of our city.
Councilmember Burke.
I want to say thank you to everyone, Michelle and my colleagues on the council. This has been a great experience as well as an opportunity for me. This is the first time I've been able to have a conversation with my colleagues on the council to find out what their priorities are, and for us to really collaborate, hear from each other about how we can improve the services that we provide for our citizens. And I hope that going forward, we'll have more opportunities that we do have conversations about priorities that we should be focused on in our city. So this has been a great experience for me. Thank you, everybody.
Mr. Manager.
Thank you, Michelle. First, I just want to say we've got some good marching orders. And as we said there at the beginning, we'll be back very quickly because we got to deal with the ARP money. But I do want to thank some people. I want to thank Michelle and Scott for their excellent work, and Michelle's staff. I was actually in Scott's seat 20 years ago. Yes, 20 years ago when we did our first strategic plan. It was a different consultant. And I can tell you, despite the pandemic, this one was much better than my first effort at this. But also, I want to thank all of you. I know I'm biased about this, but compared to some other elected bodies, not too far away from here, this is the most collegial, cooperative group I know of. You work together, you disagree, but you don't brawl. I mean, I'm being honest, you don't brawl. Come to conclusions and fair things, and every one of you wants to do something to improve the quality of life for this community. And I am very grateful for your leadership and direction for all of us. Thank you.
Well, thank you all very much. It really has been a pleasure getting to know each of you and getting to work with you and this really important work that you all have been doing. You've been doing it for many years and will continue to help build an even better Winston-Salem community. Just procedurally, I know the manager and staff have talked about coming back to you. I want you all to know that we also will provide a written report of today's session, and it will include all of the graphic recordings that Julie has been doing throughout these last 2 days, as well as all of the PowerPoint information that you saw on the screen. So in addition to, I know your staff takes notes too, you will also have a written record of today's conversation and yesterday's conversation as well too. So you'll be able to refer back to it and have that information as a guide as you continue this process, because as you all know, strategic planning is not a one and done, and building a community is not something you do one time. It is an ongoing process that you all have such a great foundation for. So with that, Mayor, I turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Michelle, and certainly thank you and your staff for the great job you did. It's been a very smooth and process. I've done many of these, as many of the council members and others have done. So thank you. Great job. So council members, if you're ready, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion and second to adjourn. All those in favor of adjourning, please say aye.
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 Anybody that doesn't want to adjourn, say no. We're unanimous. We're adjourned.